Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are in this world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, the moderator for the event, and I welcome you. We have a really great webinar today. It's a fascinating topic. We've got some really great speakers. And before we get to it, though, we do have a couple housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event will be available to you via on demand, I should say, after the event. You'll be receiving an email with a link to the event on demand. And also, we are taking questions from the audience. So at any time today during the event, if you have a question for a panelist, please just use the control panel, submit your question. We should take about 15 minutes or so near the end of the presentation and go through those questions. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's webinar. It is Eliminate Black Box Development with Agile, DevOps, and Value Stream Management, sponsored by Plutora. Our speakers today are Bob Davis, who's CMO at Plutora, and Chris Condo, who's Senior Analyst at Forrester. Thanks for joining me, gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlene.
Great. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it right on over to you, and you can do your thing.
Great. Thanks very much. Thank you, Bob, for inviting me. Thank you, Charlene. So my name's Chris Condo. I work with Forrester. Forrester is a research and analytics firm. We do research into how companies can better work with technology and how the companies that make the technology can better serve their customers. So we work with business and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. And customer-obsessed is sort of the key word there. At Forrester, we're always wondering, how is the customer impacting companies today? How is it causing them to maybe react? And we always hear about these things like digital transformation and whatnot. But these are the questions that we think that are being asked by most application development and delivery leaders when it comes to customer obsession and how can they move faster with their delivery of software. And the first question they usually ask is, how is Agile and DevOps part of my company's digital transformation initiative? Many of these companies realize that they have to kind of get out in front of the competition. They realize that they have to do more to be relevant in today's economy. And so this is one of the questions they ask. And the leaders who don't understand DevOps are often wondering, well, why is this part of it? The other thing is, what's the best way to implement Agile plus DevOps? Okay, so you've convinced me of it, but what's the best way to actually implement? How can I get the most return on investment? How will adopting Agile plus DevOps improve the customer experience? I mean, isn't that just nuts and bolts of software delivery? So these are very important questions. They're all tied together. And then how do I show a return on investment for investing in Agile plus DevOps? These are the questions that business leaders are asking because their development teams are asking them to invest in new tools, new technologies. And if you're a development leader or a business leader, you realize that the number of tools is growing every day. The amount of competition entering a marketplace for a company that's delivering a digitally enabled product is rapidly escalating to the point where it doesn't even feel like anyone has any sort of requirements for privacy, for example, requirements to meet certain government standards. The companies are moving ahead with self-driving cars. They're moving ahead by sharing your information, and it's like, how do you compete in that space? Well, Agile plus DevOps is part of that, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So one of the things that a lot of people tell me is like, that I'm sick of hearing about digital transformation. It's over and done with, or it's a hackneyed term that we've heard over and over again. But the reality is that, and this is my sort of definition of digital transformation. There's probably a million of them. Transforming the business to be customer focused and deliver value directly to the customer via digital capabilities. I mean, that basically says what digital transformation is. And the reason why I use this definition is because it ties directly to the idea of customer focused and delivering value to customers with digital capabilities. Means the idea of developing code, developing it in an automated way, developing in a way that delivers an experience and a transformative experience to your customers, and also transformative to your company in such a way that they hadn't had to deliver code that quickly. They haven't had to go that fast before. They haven't had to break down so many barriers in compliance and automation and governance. And so digital transformation, has been happening since, the early 80s when I started in software development. People were telling me back then that like, oh, there's going to be no more paper because computers are going to negate the need for it. Well, guess what? A lot of paper is still being used. Computers are going to replace everybody. Well, that hasn't happened yet either. It's sort of made the economy even richer. So digital transformation is really, really important, and it's still very relevant. But how you get to digital transformation and how Forrester sees this is this idea of the customer-obsessed operating model. The customer-obsessed operating model is all about taking something from your current state, which is the current state is every company knows they have customers. Every company collects a lot of data. Every company, is trying to be perfect. And every company, by and large, unless they've already gone through a transformation, have a lot of siloed teams. And what I mean by that are development separated from operations, development separated from product designers or product managers, and even product managers separated from business analysts and business leaders who are trying to figure out how they're going to crack open their market, make it larger, improve market share, how they're going to improve revenue per web load, or how they're going to improve various other metrics that they're getting judged by. And what you want to do is you want to take that current state and you want to move it to the right. You want to go from customer aware to being customer led. I mean, how many of us have a mobile phone, have downloaded an app that had 5 stars and decided it was junk, deleted it and moved to another app? This is how simple it's going to be to change banks. This is how simple it's going to be to change your insurance policy. This is the kind of thing that has a lot of companies scared, has a lot of companies going very, very quickly towards DevOps, Agile and DevOps world. And so being customer-led is important. Understanding how to read the customer, how to capture metrics from the customer, and how to go in that direction is so key. The next thing is going from data-rich to insights-driven, right? Don't just make these decisions willy-nilly. Don't just look at your competition and say, well, if they have a mobile app that does X, Y, and Z, I need the same thing. Think about what your customers are doing. Your customers come to your particular retail site, or they use your service, or they are using a particular product of yours because it delivers unique value. Try to use your data to derive what it is they're finding as unique. Find out what their experience is and what the experience that they want to have. Use that insights to drive your customer, to drive your product improvement. This next one is a little bit tough to swallow for a lot of QA engineers, but it's really important. Going from perfect to going to fast, right? When I started out in software development, I mean, as recently as 10 years ago, if we were going to deliver a major release to our web application, and I work for Microsoft, so I know what a web application is, I know what a major release is. It meant shutting things down. It meant, doing things during blackout periods. It meant, pushing code, once, maybe every 6 months, maybe a bug fix every month. But the idea of pushing the code was an unusual event. It wasn't a regular event. And that was the wrong approach. We shouldn't make releases. We shouldn't make, delivering bugs to the customer an unusual event. We should make it part of our everyday rhythm. And that's what fast is all about. Stop trying to be perfect. Try to go fast. Try to get the results in front of the customer so they can tell you if they're effective. Try to move the whole process and the whole machinery of how you do things faster. And then staying connected within the company, staying connected with your customers. It's all key to a top-level strategy of being customer obsessed. When you take these 4 principles of customer obsession, customer-led, insights-driven, fast, and connected, you can create what we call the modern application delivery model, which is technology, structure, culture, process, metrics, and talent. You tie them all together in this nice Celtic knot type thing, and you can actually start to accelerate and make real improvements to your development process that is directed by the customer. So we talked a lot about the customer. Here's another important aspect to the customer, and this is something that Forrester follows very carefully. It's called the customer experience. It's the complete end-to-end user experience the customer has with your product. Again, that's just my sort of definition of it, but it's how customers are using your product, your service, how they think about you, and it's what they, it's your sort of imprint on their day-to-day life. If you don't think customer experience matters, it does. Forrester has something called the Customer Experience Index. It is a measurement of the value of the customer experience that you have towards your customers. We actually measure this with real metrics and KPIs. We go out and we interview the folks that are using your products, and we deliver and derive these index numbers. And what we've done is not only have we discovered that having a higher customer experience can improve your revenue on your product, it can also improve your stock price. The guys who do the customer experience index had always been doing this sort of like revenue-driven chart. They decided to take a look at the top leaders in the CX index and the lower, the laggards as they call them, CX index. And what they found was a 29-point differentiation in stock in favor of those people with a better customer experience index. Now, it's hard to draw sort of causality here, but there's definitely a correlation that we're finding that a better customer experience leads to a better stock price, leads to better revenue, leads to overall better improvement in your company's business. And those are real reasons to think about using Agile and DevOps. So I'm going to give you like a quick overview of my history of what digital transformation means for business. Let's say you have this web page that loads, and this web page is something you might see when you're trying to download a form to do your taxes.
No, we don't know yet.
What happens is the user ends up downloading that, filling it out manually, dropping it in a mailbox, and then wondering what happened. Is there any validation? Is there did my taxes actually compute correctly? Am I going to get a return?
I think we have to get Lenore to have a look at that because we don't have anything out of the box.
Excuse me, I'm picking up a voice. I just wanted to talk to the DevOps comms guy. Thank you. And so so this is sort of like, I would call this business process optimized for the business. Now I want to talk about business process optimized for the customer. So I stole this right off of the TurboTax, all credit to TurboTax, right? You have your W-2, you take a picture of it, and then money goes in your bank, okay? That's digital transformation. That's taking a back-end experience and bringing it forward. The idea of processing the taxes and validating them, the idea of determining how much money the person's going to get on a return, the idea of actually sticking it in their bank account. These are things that happen almost instantaneously now because the customer was put in the driver's seat, not the business, right? So this is optimized to make the customer's life better. And this is by and large my short synopsis of what digital transformation is going to do for every single industry that delivers a service or product to a customer. If you are not thinking about the customer and what they want, this customer on the right-hand side wants money in the bank. If you're not thinking about what they want, if you're selling a car, if you're selling a hotel room, if you're selling a logistics service, you got to think about what is it at the end of the day that my customer is looking for, and what they want is value. And if you can't deliver to that to them quicker and faster, you're going to be put out of business in a couple of years. So you might think, all right, so great, everybody should be doing this. Chris just convinced me that this is the way the world's going. But what's going on? What's really happening though is that doing DevOps is hard. It's not easy at all. And there's a lot of roadblocks and speed bumps along the way. We did a recent survey, it's called the Global DevOps Benchmark. And what we found out is 64% of businesses are dissatisfied with their ability to release code. 42% feel that they have too many manual approval processes. I was talking to an insurance company that has to deal with an audit firm that comes in and audits them at 10 points of their software development process. And I'm like, how does anybody get anything done there? And they're like, we don't. And so those things need to really be scrutinized and changed. And 66% of teams say they lack automation tools. And that could mean a variety of things. It doesn't mean they don't have automation at all. It just means that they don't have an automated release from development to production. They don't have that ability to do that. And those things are slowing people down. If you want to look at it a different way, executives are overestimating DevOps maturity. So we just talked about businesses being upset, but here's a case where these executives feel that they're investing in these technologies, yet they're not getting the value that they thought they were going to get out of it. So when we ask the executives, do you automate your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline? 53% say, yeah, we do. But then when we talk to the DevOps people and the developers that are actually doing it, they're like, no, only about 42% are. We automate configuration management. No, the executives, people, the CIO, the CTO, of course we do. 56% said yes. But then when we talk to the actual people doing it, 45% said, yeah, we do. So 11% differential right there. And here's the widest one. My team automates releases to production. And I'm sure that CIO, CTO, they are like director of engineering are hoping that that's what's going on. But the reality is only 40% are doing that. So that we have this continuous circle here of, this is what's supposed to be going on. This is what I've been investing in, and yet it's not happening. And it's not happening because it's complicated and it's hard. So let's talk about some of the principles that guide your DevOps strategy, and maybe these will kind of help people along the way. So the first thing you need to know about is the fact that delivering faster is not enough to delight customers. You need speed with quality to deliver true value, right? And I look at this slide's kind of a cool slide. To me, it's sort of like a metaphor. This to me is like the product-oriented team that we're going to be talking about in a second, all trying to help this driver who's their customer perform as well as he can. They are customized for this car. They are designed to help this person go as fast as possible. And they even do practice runs on their pit crew just to make sure that they're doing everything the right way. So, and the way you kind of do that is you take a very expansive view of what DevOps is. You take a look at it from a people, a platform, and a process. You don't just look at it as a point of automation. This is where teams break down. You don't just think about it from, oh, we're going to do Agile, we're going to meet every day in sprint meetings, and that's how we're going to get over this. It's really a combination of things. DevOps just isn't a silver bullet. It requires hard work. It requires determination and persistence to actually make it all happen. So let's talk about the core tenets of Agile plus DevOps are really adopting lean principles. Lean principles come from the manufacturing revolution of the 70s that the Toyota guys came up with. We're managing their manufacturing line in a lean way, in a respectful manner. Organization is designed around lean principles. Architecture to support these lean principles. Automated governance, measurement, and value stream management. We're going to talk about that. So these are the lean principles, right? Lean principles are focused on creating value. You don't focus on writing a method or creating an object or doing an API. Think about what's the value that's going to be delivered to the customer. Eliminate waste, continuous improvement, respect for people, excellence. And so you always try to practice minimally viable products, build, measure, and learn, minimize work in progress, maximize flow. This is the lean principle. This sounds all great on paper, but it isn't always easy to implement. But if you keep these things in mind, this will help guide you towards a better methodology for developing software and using Agile and DevOps together. So what do we mean by product-oriented teams? You hear about this a lot. This is the Forrester version. This is my own experience coming from a high-end software development architecture and software development team. You have this product-oriented team in the middle, and around them are shared services and shared capabilities. So I have a lot of people say, oh, does every product team have to have a security expert? Well, yes and no, right? There's a security aspect in the organization that have security experts. Everybody on the product team, though, needs to understand what are those best practices to develop secure software from the beginning to the end. How do I actually scale what I'm building? If I'm doing a microservice, how is it going to scale out? Maybe there's an architect in your organization who understands these things and can impart upon this product team what are the best practices. So every time you start a new project, every time you kick off a new product development, the shared services team is part of the kickoff, and the shared services team sort of helps shepherd the product along the way. So everybody sort of shares in the success of this product team. But the product team owns implementing it. The product team owns executing it. The product team owns maintaining it. They're the ones who understand the product best. And so having a long sort of like duration of ownership where there's persistence is also very key. And there's other research to back this up. If you look at the Puppet Labs State of DevOps, they talk about product-oriented teams really being key to success. So this is a very important aspect to moving forward, breaking down silos and making your team more effective. The next one is adopting sort of, componentized architectures, so these different product teams can actually move a little bit autonomously from each other. So they, enable product-centric teams with a microservice architecture, enable agile release strategies, and simplify test and maintenance because it's small, it's smaller, it's more contained, it's easier to manage. And so the other important thing, though, the flip side of the coin here is that don't do microservices for the sake of microservices. Do an intelligent analysis of your application. Break up various pieces of it as necessary. And those things that are more volatile, that need to run independently from each other, those are the things that should be in microservices. If you have a legacy application and you have a relatively stable piece, maybe it doesn't need to be changed. If you're starting from a green field, well, if you look at what Martin Fowler said recently from ThoughtWorks, he's like, maybe you're better off starting off with a monolith and doing an MVP that way and then breaking up into microservices. But the bottom line is just don't do them for the sake of doing them. Do them for the right reason, and that reason is if they're going to deliver value to your customer. The next thing is automated governance at key control points. As much as possible, try to automate all the scanning of code, whether it's whether using a Sonar Cube or something like that. Automate the release out the door if you're using Plutora or some other kind of application. Build artifacts in an artifact repository. Try to automate these things as much as possible so that your end-to-end kind of like goalposts are maybe the only places where someone's actually manually checking things and potentially, catching issues at the last minute or, reviewing things at the very beginning to make sure it's going to deliver customer value. The next thing that we want to talk about is value stream with Agile plus DevOps equals KPIs. All right. So we've talked about, I kind of talked around this thing of value stream and what value stream management is. Value stream management is all about capturing every single step of your development process and then applying like a KPI to it or capturing a metric off it so you can put a KPI around it. So every single step that you see in this particular sort of continuous integration, continuous delivery oval has a certain component where a KPI can be captured. You want to be capturing those KPIs as much as possible so you can apply them to your process. And in the end, you'll have this sort of value stream map and value stream management process where you can actually see all of the progress being made through every single step. You can actually see the amount of time that's lead time, the amount of time that's process time. You can understand where there are slowdowns, where things need to be sped up. You can do this across multiple product lines rather than just a single, a single stream of work that maybe has a, an agile planning tool at the beginning and a release at the end. And you're like, okay, this one service, went, from end to end, and it took maybe a month to do it. But I'm a product manager, and I have to see how these other 10 products are doing. With a value stream management product, you can kind of get that single pane of glass to see the whole entire pattern of work flowing through your tool chain. And the right value stream management tool should provide you analytics, can provide you optics, and can provide you sort of like a various points of view, whether you're a release manager, a developer, or a product manager, so you can get the metrics and get the transparency that you need from the software development process. So one of the biggest things that you probably hear about is like, all right, so work items go in, but then like, I don't know why it takes so long to get things out. A value stream management tool basically allows you to have that kind of visibility and transparency on the software development process that you don't normally get by just having automation and having a CI/CD tool chain. It just sort of provides that whole sort of top level view of what's happening. So the whole idea is refine, reduce, measure, and repeat. Use value stream mapping to sort of uncover, and understand your whole process, and then look for a value stream management tool that can actually put that map and make it like a live representation of what's going on rather than just a static representation. Think about implementing change, delivering results, and measuring impact. And then once you measure that impact, once you capture those KPIs, once you see how your customers are responding, well, then you can go ahead and think about what's the next step to improve. And this gets back to the whole digital transformation thing. Digital transformation isn't like a start and an end. It's this circle right here. It just keeps going and going and going. You have to always think about this continuous improvement cycle. You can't think of it as as an end game. It's just the end game is to always be in the mode of continuous improving. And so what I'll leave you with is this very interesting concept of DevOps disconnects. We've done some research that says, DevOps and the concepts of DevOps are most often practiced with systems of automation, which means that, people aren't thinking about necessarily the team. It means they're not necessarily thinking about the business. They're just thinking about automation. So that really needs to sort of grow. So 66% of developers expect to be doing some DevOps by the end of 2017. Our data for 2018 will be coming out pretty soon. I'm sure that's going to grow. But even with that, you see this sort of red exclamation point in the top right corner. 64% of development shops integrate Dev and Ops on at least some teams, but 38% of them, but only 38% cite a really great working relationship. I was just at Jenkins World the other day, and I heard a DevOps team griping about the fact that the developers don't want to read log files and don't want to actually do their job. And it's these things need to be brought together. People need to understand what their role is for delivering value to customers. A software engineer's job is to create a product that's going to be used by a customer. It's not just the right software. And on the same token, operational folks that are hosting, and managing and enabling all these things to go into production need to realize that they're also serving the customer. And if everybody can just get on the same page and think about this as a whole value stream and delivering value, everyone will probably be in a better situation. And then there's a few other stats here. 23% of development teams are automating builds. Well, that means 77% aren't. They're not using continuous integration and continuous delivery. So 39% of developers use open source build and release management tools. Well, that's another interesting concept about the growth of open source. But the real key takeaway is that there's more automation and more development could be done, but it needs to kind of be done in concert with the rest of the teams. And with that, I'll close out and say thank you very much. I'm going to be handing this over to Bob, who will be taking it from here.
Thanks a lot, Chris. That was an awesome overview of what's going on in the world of DevOps, digital transformation, and so forth. And I'm struck by all of the various aspects, the various continuous integration, delivery, DevOps, lean, lots of concepts there. And I know I've certainly enjoyed talking to Chris and other analysts at Forrester to better understand the dynamics of what's going on in this space, because I think the concepts that Chris went through are critical to ultimately the transition, not just to DevOps, not just to a digital transformation, but a transformation to success. That indeed, without embracing these concepts and moving forward, the ability to compete in today's world is very much compromised. So again, thank you, Chris, for that introduction. And what I want to do now is just kind of frame this a little bit from our perspective as a company that provides a platform for organizations to actually accomplish the exact things that Chris is talking about, to be able to provide visibility into the entire release process of applications, to not only provide automation, but to make sense of automation across the entirety of a release where automation might be occurring in multiple places throughout the process, and to do so in a way that gives control that ultimately limits, the risk associated with moving faster. Plutora itself is a company that's been around several years to solve this problem, born out of some folks that were actually in the IT trenches, worried about divesting organizations, providing support for mergers, and all the while dealing with projects in the context of software and application release that are incredibly tightly coupled. And if you want to be that customer-focused, customer-led organization, you've got to get your hands around all of the various things that touch each other in the applications that you deliver as an organization. I was talking to a company that had an application for a telco for a TV situation where I press the button on my remote and it says guide, and up on the screen comes all of the shows and channels that are available to me. And what was interesting was, in order to accomplish that goal, 36 different systems had to be touched, working in conjunction on the right version, on the same page, and all functioning in order for that very simple application to work. All of this comes to the point where we're saying, look, if you went to bed last night as an industrial company, you need to become a software company. That's a quote from the chairman and CEO of GE, as noted on the slide. And that sentiment is one that I've heard, reflected in all kinds of different CEOs, conferences, individual discussions with customers, and so forth. One very prominent CEO in a large organization here in Silicon Valley indicated that some 40% of companies that exist today will be out of business in 5 years because they won't achieve this goal. The notion of saying, I'm a bank and I'll provide software versus I'm a software company that's going to provide banking services might sound like a subtle distinction, but is a major focus that organizations need to have in order to really understand what's going on. The idea of DevOps and the idea of going faster is not a new thing. People have been going faster. The DevOps initiative started years ago. And as you can see on the slide, what's interesting is the explosion of tools all designed around providing a DevOps, an Agile, a faster delivery of application to the customer has been growing significantly over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years. In fact, big percentages of companies will say, look, I'm doing DevOps. I have DevOps capabilities. I've bought a number of tools, automation tools, requirements management tools, deployment tools. I'm doing DevOps, right? And you see the stats that Chris was going through where the executives are saying, yeah, we're doing DevOps. We have lean software principles. We're delivering products faster to the customers. And the people in the actual trenches doing the work are going, maybe not so fast. We have some of the tools. It's really not working like you might think it is. And the reason for that is that there's a full lack of alignment between those development tools that are being spent, the hiring that's going in to run those development tools from inception to deployment. The question is that delivering on the business strategy? In the boardroom, if I say I want to become more friendly to mobile, I don't know about you, but I haven't been to a brick and mortar bank in years, but I bank every day and I do that on my phone. If I'm a boardroom and I'm saying I want to implement that kind of strategy, how do I know it's being implemented at the level where the software is going out to the organizations, to the customers? I've talked to organizations where when they delivered the software, product management people had to actually go out to the ATMs and exercise the ATM controls to determine whether or not the software actually got deployed. The notion of not having the visibility, of not having that full view of the business strategy and the goals of the organization down to the deployment, at the same time that I'm spending millions of dollars on tools that I think, as a business leader, are giving me DevOps. So the question becomes, does it work? Is it solving the problem? And I think if I look, as we talk to customers and we look at what they're going through, a lot of that history started with, Agile and just saying, look, I can remember years ago, people talking about the escalator versus the elevator in terms of how they're going to be delivering software and saying, we can do it better in the engineering department. We need to be agile. And those kinds of things really affected the silos of the engineering organization. I can make a development team faster. But as you can see, it really only covered, the planning and coding and maybe a little bit of the build. It left a lot of things uncovered, and the smoothness through which an application would be released was therefore dependent on the communication across the various organizations doing the development. And over time, there's been an evolution through continuous integration and delivery. And now we see DevOps, which is really a system that starts with planning and goes all the way to deploying, but also the feedback into making things better. We talk about the number of releases people are doing, and if I'm doing this on one release, not a problem. If I'm doing this on thousands of releases, and on releases that might have tens, 20s, maybe 100 different application and infrastructure components that need to work together to make an application work, I have to think of the process as a system, not as a series of automation activities or team improvement activities, but rather a system. And only then can I get to the level of release cadence that Chris was referring to in terms of being customer-led, customer-focused, and being able to iterate quickly to be able to provide capabilities right to the customer hand very quickly. And if I don't think of it as a system, and I don't think of it across all of the components of a single release, let alone all of the releases, I will fail. I'll have pockets of automation, pockets of capability, but the overall system will break. And a lot of the reason for that has to do with where the money has been spent. Remember that slide early in my part of the presentation where it showed the growth in tool purchases, millions of dollars, probably billions of dollars spent worldwide on DevOps tools, automation tools, requirements management tools, deployment tools, etc. But as you can see, that really only covers about 27% of what the organizational focus needs to be in order to achieve the success. That system view of DevOps needs to take into account the process changes, needs to take into account the notion of collaboration. People need to be able to communicate without having to depend on a weekly or a bi-weekly meeting or spending all weekend in a conference room trying to coordinate delivery schedules. There has to be a better way to exchange information and to give people visibility. And there's a cultural shift. Everybody's role is evolving. The role of the tester evolves. The role of the QA department evolves. The role of the dev person evolves, where they might be doing more of their own testing early on. Keep in mind, the earlier I find a bug, the earlier I find a problem, the cheaper it is to the business in delivering the application. And that's not just about the tool. That's about all of these things working together. And as we, Plutora, approach the system, we look and say, there's a ton of tools. The ecosystem is filled with vendors, and there's many waves in the Forrester vernacular that talk about different aspects of DevOps deployment, delivery, and management. What we provide is kind of the umbrella around that whole thing that starts to take into account not just the tools, but also all of the collaboration, the integration, the management. As you can see, what's required, what we provide, and what the value stream management effort really needs to be able to solve is to be able to provide full visibility from the time a project is initiated to the time it is delivered to production. In fact, even after it's delivered to production, how well it's doing, feed that back in and have that all viewed from a single source of truth. Being able to have full visibility into that entire process, but do so without upsetting the momentum, the very good momentum that the purchase of all those tools has provided. Automating release to production is a solid, valuable component made more useful to the delivery of applications when it's incorporated into a system that complements it through the collaboration, through the visibility and so forth of the entire process. In fact, in some discussions I've had with customers and indeed analysts at Forrester, part of some of these initiatives is to say, if I put a black box around that entire tool chain on the bottom of this diagram, and I think of it in terms of a project initiation, the spec, the requirements document that drives the development of a project, and I want to compare that with the outcome. Is it working? And that's what we're hearing CIOs and boardrooms starting to ask us. They're saying, look, we've been investing in tools. We've seen some of those stats today from both Chris and I. We've been investing in tools. Is it working? Is the application we delivering on the strategy that we set out to accomplish? Is it happening on time? Is the scope of the release faithful to what the intention of that release was? Or did I have to pull features out, key features that might disappoint a customer and make it, more top of mind for them to look for alternative approaches? Customer-led software delivered services by an organization, even a large one, have the benefit of providing that gratification to the customer. It also makes it very easy for a customer to switch. If what I'm doing is deleting an app and adding a new one, and that's what I need to do to switch, I need to get this right. And if I'm going to get it right, I've got to have the visibility across the entire system to say, what are the KPIs? Am I meeting them? And am I succeeding? I need to have a dashboard that gives me a view across everything from the release, the health of the test, the faithfulness to the original specs of the project. And I need to do so in a way that isn't just faster, but it's better. That notion of the race car with the pit crew, it's not just about how big of an engine and is that, what manufacturer of a car it is, but that entire machine of that race can fall flat if the guy filling the gas tank screws up. Same thing. I can't just be faster. I've got to look at every aspect. I've got to look at the full release schedule, not just across the single release, but all the releases in my portfolio. And in fact, many of these projects are critical path items, critical success factors for the success of another one. I mentioned the telecom app where with the guide feature, 35, 36 systems to make that work. One of them falls down, you're calling the cable company saying, hey, I'm not going to stick with you guys. I'm moving to company XYZ instead. It's real. It happens. We've all done it. We need to be able to deliver with that kind of visibility. We need to be able to not just deploy automatically, but we need to be able to provide a development plan that does it in an orchestrated way every time. We used to talk about automation, when it first came out, as something that would replace a person. I don't think that's the case. I think the notion of automation is, one of the very big benefits of automation is consistency. If I can roll something out the same way every time, then regardless of who's doing the deployment, I can be assured of the quality of that. And in order to do that, I'm deploying across multiple systems. And that deployment plan and having that entire thing get orchestrated is critical. And part of that orchestration is in the environment. There's a tremendous amount of testing that's going on, from the developer to acceptance testing and everything in between. And we've seen in the World Quality Report, for example, that almost half of the companies that were surveyed, and we're talking about global 1,000 companies, have no visibility, no real management strategy for their environments. Those environments have to be configured correctly, they have to be available, they have to be managed in such a way that, just like if you're checking into a hotel, that when you get there, that room is available. And if it's not, you wait. And if you wait, you're unhappy. And those wait times can insert tremendous amount of error in the delivery of an application out to a customer. So, again, not just faster, but, better in the context of the environment. And in fact, even have self-service. to where the organization that's working on releasing software, and remember, we're talking about thousands of releases a year. The biggest software companies in Silicon Valley, the classic ones, are, deliver, a handful of releases, 3-4 releases of their major products a year. The unicorns like the Facebooks and Netflix, they're releasing them on a minute-by-minute basis practically, thousands a day. A lot of the organizations we're talking to are looking at one every 9 months. That's not going to cut it. That's got to get faster. And if I have all of the visibility and insight that we've been talking about, and I can provide self-service to those individuals along the path that are involved in the release, I can start to really drive collaboration. And that is incredibly powerful. It allows me to connect it with quality. It allows me to connect all of the aspects of test. We talk about automated testing and we say, I'm automating all my testing, I'm done. Well, maybe not so fast. Maybe there's got to be the collective insight into what's going on across all the various automated testing, and in fact, the manual testing that's involved, whether it's being done early in the stage or in an exploratory sense after the fact. All of this information needs to be fed in so that that enterprise DevOps platform actually becomes a platform of quality, where I'm actually managing the quality across release, across the environment management, and in fact, test. And when I look at test and I look at those environments, I see an area where we have significant interest because we lose control here too often. The visibility into where the various releases are across all the different aspects, from my build servers, my integration servers, test servers, all the way into pre-production and production. I could have a single release with multiple versions showing up in multiple places. And I got to make sure I'm testing against the proper components and getting that feedback back into the system, back into that DevOps platform, that suite of modules and suite of applications that are really delivering the solution to the customers. And what we've seen is it works. We've got several examples that result in significant benefit to the customers. The notion of really doubling the efficiency, 2.5 times the number of releases and almost the same number of changes on top of that on the releases, just by providing better collaboration, by providing more visibility, and by providing the ability to look at, measure, and analyze the KPIs every step of the way. And in fact, you look at another example of a healthcare company that had a 2/3 reduction in incidents in their environment issues and 85% less time spent coordinating releases, which I can tell you from personal knowledge of this situation gave a lot of people their weekends back. So it's a very significant kind of capability. And let's not lose sight of the fact, if you look at that wireless division on the left, 10,000 people in IT with 8,000 of them working on applications. If they were a company in Silicon Valley delivering software, they'd be one of the largest in the entire area. These companies that people think of as brick and mortar, legacy, old-fashioned, whatever, these guys are more software company oriented than many software companies I know. It's a significant achievement to be able to get to that point. And that's why our mission has been to really work with companies and help them with the predictability of a release, the ability to deliver a much higher quality, which significantly reduces risks, and to do so across the entire release portfolio with special attention to the tightly coupled nature of most of these applications, meaning the significant number of dependencies associated with any one feature or application across many different systems. So that's what we try to do. We've talked quite a bit with Chris and the analysts at Forrester, customers, other thought leaders in the space to really understand where we can add value. And we think working with that ecosystem, working with the existing automation and DevOps tools that are available, not requiring the rip and replace of those things, but rather embracing them in a platform and providing the visibility and analytics necessary to ensure that I can deliver high quality releases with the end game that we want to help these enterprises become the best software companies in the world. We think of them as software juggernauts. We want to turn the most, legacy company you can think of into the leading edge software juggernaut that they can be and need to be in order to succeed in the business in this time of digital transformation. So with that, I think I will stop. We have not quite 15 minutes, but a little bit of time for questions. And I'm hoping you found that interesting and can take some nuggets from it. Thank you for listening.
Considering some of the questions we've gotten in so far, I would say that folks have gotten a lot out of the webinar. So we do want to jump into those questions, but I do want to let you guys know there's still time. If you have a question for Bob or for Chris, just use that control panel, go ahead and get it in. Whatever questions we don't get to during the Q&A session, just know that Chris and Bob, I'm sure, will be more than happy to follow up post-event, and as they're going to have all the questions. So let's move right into the questions now. The first question is from Greg. He asks, are there benefits to having both the product teams and the shared service teams co-own the entire life cycle of service, features, microservices, you choose, in order to sustain a DevSecOps mindset up and down the value stream?
I think I'll take that one since I showed that slide.
Right.
I think so. I think that the product team, having a product owner sort of guide and be kind of like the spokesperson from the business perspective, that person really should understand the value of the security. So if you're thinking about DevSecOps, you're thinking about, scanning open source components, or, basically just developing your code to be secure from the beginning. As a developer at Microsoft, we always talked about defense in depth. And that meant not only just doing code scanning and making sure that you're covering all the bases, but making sure that your design of your product, the architecture, the APIs are all interacting with the right components. They all have the right level of access. And they also provide a certain level of visibility or no visibility into certain areas that might be sensitive. So having a product owner kind of own all those sort of, I would say, sort of responsibilities and requirements would be very important to helping sort of guide the rest of the product team through all right, well, what do we know that we have to write the code, we know we have to develop and deliver the application, but sometimes there are things beyond our sphere of knowledge, beyond just executing, that this product owner really should be the person that's kind of guiding them and saying, we need to make sure we cover all these things, and raising those issues in meetings. And when they use these shared services teams, that product owner and probably some developer, a lead developer, usually a senior one, on the team, is the liaison for that team with the security team in the shared services model. And they're meeting with the security person saying, what do we need to do? We're starting out with this new service. We're starting out with this new capability. Maybe it's processing transactions. How do we, best, what are the best practices? Taking that back and just making sure that they own it, right? And then every step of the way, reviewing it, making sure that they're checking off all the boxes, and then following up with the operations team and saying, here's what's coming down the pipe. We're delivering this very secure, this piece of code that needs to have maybe a higher security bar than the average piece of code. How are we going to maintain it? How are we going to instantiate the server hardware for it? Are we managing on premise or in the cloud? And all those things are really complicated. The thing that you don't want to do, the anti-pattern to that, and this is why I'm spending a lot of time on what the good pattern is, but the anti-pattern is, we know we're going to have to do security, and the week before we decide to release, we'll call up the security guy and say, hey, what do you think? Does this look good? And then we'll call up the ops guy and say, oh, by the way, we're going to be storing credit cards on a live server. What do you think about that? I mean, your whole schedule is just going to fall on the floor and fall apart. And not only that, bolt-on security is just the worst way to go. So that's my long-winded answer. Sorry.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
All right. So, Bob, do you have anything that you want to add to that, or should we just plow forward?
I think that was That was real good. I think we can move forward.
All right, great. So I guess along with that then, Greg also had the question, could digital transformation also be viewed as transforming an organization in the same way that individuals, say consumers, have transformed over the past decade to live, thrive, and drive in a digitally augmented world? So I guess it's survive or die.
Well, I'll go ahead and kick that one off. I think the answer to that is absolutely. Not only is that should happen, but if it doesn't happen, you know there will be death. In fact, the evolution of the consumer is driving the evolution of the digital organization, of the digital transformation. I mean, Chris mentioned this notion of the movement from customer aware to customer led. Consumer is king with social, with app, with the way things are getting interfaced to. That evolution has already happened, and if companies can't respond to that, deliver the kind of capabilities that are needed, they will lose competitive ground. And in order to do that, the organization as a whole needs to act as one. It can't act as a series of silos. It has to act as one. And that ability to act as one is everything that we've been talking about with value stream management, with a DevOps or an enterprise platform that can scale. It's a requirement.
Okay, Chris, you have anything you want to add to that?
I was going to say, it's an old example, but it's a really good one, even though the company's new, is the whole Uber versus taxis. There's recently there was really tragic news about a taxi cab driver, taking his life because he mortgaged his house to buy a medallion so he could be a taxi driver in New York City. He thought that his investment was going to be secure because the government had all these policies in place. You had to be compliant. You had to have a cab that met certain rules. And then Uber comes along and completely upends that whole entire market and says, oh, well, we're not cab drivers. These are just people driving people around, and put them out of business. Now, that's a really radical approach to personal travel. And so if you think about your business and think about how do customers use my product, how they use my service, how are businesses using my service, is it possible that something like that could happen where that customer that I rely on and think that I own their market because I'm entrenched with them, could they someday just upend and say, you know what, I don't need you anymore. I can go to somebody else and somehow completely do an end around with where you thought you owned a market, and it turns out you never really did. And so those are the kinds of transformations that we're talking about. Wholesale market transformations, like Bob was saying, it's like social, the whole idea that everyone's communicating what's going on. It's a hyper-connected world. And if you're not connected with those customers, you are definitely going to lose out.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Okay, so doing a quick time check. We have about 2 minutes to the top of the hour. I think we have time for one more question. And Bob, this one is right up your alley. Nayeli asks, does Plutora have a trial version?
We do have trial versions of parts of our system that are available online. We do have bi-weekly demos that people can connect into and get a real good handle on the product. And if interested, we can get trial and proof of concept capabilities into your organization. So we have a number of ways to start getting a handle and touch the product.
All right, great. Well, unfortunately, that is about all the time that we do have for the question and answers. If we didn't get to your question, like I said before, just know that Chris and Bob will have all of the questions, and I'm sure there'll be a representative from their organization. We'll be happy to get in touch with you to get your question answered. Also, just a reminder, today's event has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of it, it will be available to you on demand after the event. You will be receiving a link via email that will take you to the event on demand. Also, the webinar will be hosted on demand on DevOps.com, so you can find it there as well. Also, while you're on DevOps.com, just take a look at some of the other webinars we have coming up. We have a ton of them, and hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. But for now, it leaves it for me to say thank you very much to Bob Davis and Chris Condo for providing such insightful information. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. And thank you to the audience for attending today's webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon and signing off. Have a great day, everybody.